So it has been announced in the press, and according to a Tuesday court filing by the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, remember that's David Weiss, who was the Trump appointee, who has been investigating Hunter Biden since 2018, so for 5 years. Now we are expected that Hunter will plead guilty to a tax-related misdemeanor, 2 of those in a plea agreement, no jail time, 2 years of probation. And then he is going to have that gun charge because he was using drugs, and that's illegal. That could carry 10 years in jail and a fine of $250,000. That is being diverted. So that means he will actually, if he completes his probation and the diversion, whatever treatment that requires, he will never actually be charged with that crime. That would be removed from his record. So he is pleading guilty to 2 tax misdemeanors. Either one of those would only carry about a year in prison. He's already paid back the financial amount to the IRS, so that has already been issued. Now, it's the one glimmer of hope is that the investigation does not conclude. So the U.S. Attorney did not say, "This is it. I'm done investigating Hunter Biden." He said that the investigation continues. We know this U.S. Attorney was provided the 1023 from the FBI, and it could be researching that and that allegation about the $5 million to President Biden when he was vice president and to Hunter Biden from the Burisma, head of Burisma. We've heard about the tapes. We've heard about all these issues. So that still very much could be investigated right now. I think the question is on these charges is, why did they take 5 years? I get the more complicated issues that may have arisen more recently, like with that 1023, whenever the U.S. Attorney got that, and that's a more complicated investigation to go through. But, Dad, I think what people are going to be upset about, it does feel like a 2-tiered system of justice. He could have gone to jail. Instead, he gets slaps on the wrist. Well, I mean, one of these charges does carry up to 10 years. It was a felony. The gun charge, but I mean, he got the least.
If you look at what they did, he's gotten away with it. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
He got away with it. And you look at Alan Weisselberg, who was the CFO for the Trump organization, who never had any criminal exposure in his life. And then the New York DA goes after him, trying to press him to flip against the former president. And what happens there? He ends up in Rikers Island, which is a notorious prison in New York, for failure to pay taxes on a free car and tuition that the former president paid for his grandkids' private school. And he ends up in jail in Rikers Island. Hunter Biden is going to end up with pleading guilty to basically a speeding ticket.
What people are confused there is it felt like a company car. I mean, there's a lot of people listening to this broadcast right now that probably, we know truckers out there, people drive.
You get paid if you pay the tuition to the school, there's no gift tax. You could pay anybody's tuition to a school.
People get
all the time.
The school can do it too.
Of course.
School gives out tuition breaks.
But this wasn't that.
So again, 2-tiered system of justice. If you're associated with Donald Trump, you end up in prison with your plea deal. You don't get just a slap on the even when it looks lighter, 3 months in prison, you still got to go to prison at Rikers Island. Not a pleasant place. Basically a place where the prisoners run the island. I mean, it's been the subject of a lot of controversy recently in New York because of how poorly run Rikers is and how dangerous it is to be a prisoner at Rikers Island, which is where everyone gets processed through if you're arrested in the city of New York.
But it's a notorious prison. I mean, it's a horrible prison.
And it's supposed to be a holding prison.
Right.
But it ends up, because of the overcrowding of the prisons there, and it's just very dangerous because there are people like Alan Weisselberg in there with people who got picked up for murder.
Let's take phone calls from people on this.
Yeah, do you need any more confirmation that there's 2 systems of justice in the United States of America, one for Washington, D.C. elites and one for all of us? I guess we call it conservatives or patriots. $5 years, and this one's still not done. Now, I guess the only hope is it's not done because there's more serious, complicated charges being looked at. But honestly, I'm not going to keep too much faith in these investigations. I think we need to realize
this is what it is.
The justice system is not in a good place right now. It is not a fair system. It does treat Washington elites differently. That's the system we live under now, and it's why we want to elect officials who will get reform done.
Somebody on Rumble wrote, "Danger, danger, we're officially on a slippery slope." We are down that slippery slope, let me tell you. That's almost an understatement. Here's the problem. You look at first of all, you realize the pile-on that's about to happen to Donald Trump. I mean, it really has. He gets indicted in New York on charges that no real lawyer thinks are crimes.
Yep.
The DA case in New York, I think, does end up going to victory for Trump. Then you got the documents issue. Biden has 1,800 documents, some of them in his garage. Nothing happens to him. Mike Pence is under investigation. Nothing happens to him.
Yeah,
Donald Trump gets indicted with a 37-count indictment from Jack Smith. Then you're about probably 6 weeks away from an indictment in Fulton County. And in between now and then, you may see an indictment on January 6 matters.
From Jack Smith.
Yes. So what you have, it's a pile-on. They are piling on here. They're so concerned that the former president is going to be the nominee, which it clearly looks like he is, that they're doing everything they can to knock him out. I think it's having the opposite effect. The poll numbers certainly indicate that. But, it's a pile-on. And put the politics aside, it's not the way the justice system is supposed to work.
It does seem to bring back the politics. At first, it was like they thought that maybe he would still be the nominee, but this would damage him enough to the mainstream voter. Now I think they look at the polls, they say, oh, he's beating us in some of the polls. He's trending higher than ever before. He's kind of getting the numbers of 2016 back again. When in the side of the Republican Party, he's at 60%. He's about the same poll numbers as Joe Biden has inside his party right now. And so now I think they're thinking, we got to bury him. We don't want him to be the nominee. So I think something shifted even in their strategy and their misuse of I think it's illegal use of the law enforcement to target politicians. And you see the disparity, the difference in treatment is right in front of our eyes today. Did you really expect Hunter Biden to get in real trouble? I don't think anybody did. I think most of our listeners probably didn't think he would ever actually get into real trouble. Then they learned about that Burisma payment, thought, okay, maybe there's something there because it's more serious and that involves the big guy, so that it would be a more serious investigation. Now, David Weiss is not done. He's not stepping down as U.S. attorney. He's not closing out the Hunter Biden investigation. It continues. So maybe this was brought because of statute of limitations. I mean, we don't know all of the thinking here, but I do want to take your phone calls. David's calling in New York on line 2. Hey, David.
Hi, how are you, gentlemen?
Great.
Thank you for your work. Appreciate it. I think I know people downtown New York City at places like the Justice Department, and just talking to them about anything can really irritate you in the way they think. Donald Trump has done more than any president this century. You may not like him going on to Twitter 20 hours a day and some of the other things he says and does, but push come to shove, if he runs for president, I'm hoping everybody can ignore that and vote for him, because he's going to do more for this country if everybody would just work with him, which we know they don't want to. And I'm talking about the House and the Senate.
Well, I'll tell you this: you wouldn't have had Ukraine and a war with Russia invading Ukraine. You wouldn't have China going into Taiwan at any moment. I mean, they're making that clear. Yeah. You wouldn't have spy balloons flying over the United States. You wouldn't have Saudi Arabia having to maybe cozy up a little bit to Iran, who they can't stand because they don't trust the United States and all this. So the policies make a difference. But you're seeing the justice system totally weaponized, completely weaponized. Exactly what we were saying when we were representing Trump, Jordan, is exactly what's happening again. They weaponize these entities. You know, everybody's forgetting that John Durham said the whole thing against Trump was a hoax. He said it. Durham said it. Now, the problem is, again, took him 4 years to do it. Took him longer than to investigate Mueller. It took him longer than Mueller.
He got nothing done.
He got nothing done.
No one faced real justice.
No.
And we were talking about yesterday, too, the absurdity here. We got regular taxpayers in America, talking about two-tiered system of justice. They get IRS undercover agents at their house using false names, false pretense to enter the house, then tries to get them to sign documents, gets angry with them when they call their estate attorney, and then angry when the person says, this might be a scammer. I got their license plate number. I'm going to call local police because there's somebody using a fake name around trying to enter people's homes. Then that person, the IRS agent, files a complaint against the police department and says, I'm an IRS agent. I can go into anyone's home whenever I want. That's not true. If they don't have a warrant, they can't go into your home.
I want to hear from that. By the way, the individual that was involved in that, I'd be happy to represent them against a civil rights action against the United States.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, they got the letter from the IRS saying there's nothing. So there was no reason.
And their famous apologies.
But that agent was trying to get them to
Has
sign
that agent
something.
been fired? Has that agent been reprimanded? Has that agent been brought up to HR? Has he been up to the Office of Professional Responsibility? I suspect the answer to all of that is no. That's why you need to sue them when they do this.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to. Jim Jordan brought this to light. They're going to do their investigation, but there is, for that individual out there, claims to be made in court that you don't just have to say, okay, thankfully this is done. You could fight back here.
Landon on Rumble asked, can you actually charge the son of a president anyways? Wouldn't the president just give him a pardon? So here's what's interesting about that. And politically, of course, he can give him a pardon, but you don't really. It's a misdemeanor, so he's not going to lose his right to vote.
Yeah, and so I don't think he would need to.
And then he said, I think they won't put a Secret Service protectee in prison. That part's probably true.
That goes to the bigger issue. I've said before on television. I'm not saying whether President Trump is going to be reelected or not, but I've said I don't think he'll be behind bars.
No, they're not going to be able to put a protectee behind bars. That would be ridiculous.
So, I think they would like to.
But let's play with John Levin. This is a reporter for the New York Post, a political reporter. I mentioned the Alan Weisselberg situation. We knew Alan. I mean, and he gets charged with this ridiculous charge and ends up in Rikers Island. It ends up being for 5 months. I think he served 114 days or something. Take a listen.
Alan Weisselberg, President Trump's old CFO at the Trump Organization, was sent to Rikers Island, 75-year-old grandfather, for like 5 months because he didn't report taxes on a company car, and Trump gave free tuition to his kids to go to college, and he didn't report that as income. That kind of stuff. And he was sent to Rikers Island, which is a terrible place here in New York City. And the amount of incredible punitive response toward one side, but then the other side always seems to have one, escape after another.
Yeah, I mean, it is a two-tiered system of justice. I want your reaction to this, and how does it impact what you're thinking about in the upcoming election? We'll take your calls at 800-684-3110, 1-800-684-3110. I wasn't here yesterday, but I want to mention, Jordan, the case you were talking about with this IRS situation. Yeah. What an abusive process for a criminal investigation division agent under false pretenses, using a false name, entering someone's home without a warrant. The agent, using the false name and pretense, tells the tax lawyer, I'm an IRS special agent, I can go anywhere I want. False. You still have to have a warrant, which he didn't have. Then the whole thing was bogus. And the IRS's responses were, sorry, we're closing out the file. That's not good enough. Now, maybe the individual involved has lawyers, but we'd be happy to help them. I was an IRS lawyer. We're the ones who brought the case against the IRS on the Tea Party cases. Don't let the government get away with this. This is absurd behavior. And what's happening now on this situation with Hunter Biden, look, Hunter Biden has a great lawyer. I'm going to say that. He's a friend of mine. He's a great lawyer. His name is Abby Law. I put him in the top criminal defense lawyers in the United States, in the top 5, and I probably put him as number 1 in the top 5. I mean, he's that good. And he did his client's job. He did the right job. And by the way, he came in late and was able to get this. And that was with a Republican U.S. attorney in Delaware. Because they don't want to try a case against the guy that beat John Edwards and won the rap for John Edwards. He was found not guilty. Bob Menendez found not guilty. I mean, Abby Lowell is a really good lawyer. But it is a two-tiered system of justice. And if you put it back on the Trump side, the pile on folks on that one hasn't even started yet. It's about to come like an avalanche. Now, I hope the former president's prepared and gets the right lawyers involved, because it's about to be an avalanche. Let's go right back to the phone.
Yeah, Deborah called in from Texas online too. Hey, Deborah.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. As an American conservative, I am fed up with our two-tier justice system. I feel disenfranchised from my country, and as I watch Facebook comments, I can tell people are throwing in the towel. I want to know where the riots and protests and folks who play the white privilege cards are, because if this were anyone else, I'm sure that would be happening.
Well, I think, listen, we have to realize this is the problem. How do we know what the fix is? The fix is electoral victories, which, by the way, we can win. It's proven that Republicans can win. This idea that we can't win is wrong. It's inaccurate. We can harvest ballots in states where it's legal to harvest ballots. We can get early votes in states where it's that you can do no issue early voting and absentee voting. And ultimately, you need then reform. We know that needs to be done. And I think, so you need bold leaders who are going to be willing to take on Washington. And you need, you need to give them some support in the House and the Senate when you elect the president. So don't have them trying to do everything through the executive branch. They can do a lot, but they're going to need some congressional support because there's going to be some new laws that need to be written to be able to clear out these bad acting bureaucrats to make it easier. Right now, it's almost impossible to fire these people. Even when you do fire them, they end up taking you to court and getting their benefits back, even when they were fired for cause. I mean, so there's got to be changes made to the system. But if we give up hope, that's what the left wants, then they're going to run rampant. Not only, again, is it people like Donald Trump who are going to be facing legal jeopardy? It'll be all of us, because they will totally weaponize the system against not just high-profile leaders. And I don't think we're at a point of giving up. I get that we cannot put too much hope into these prosecutors. Remember, they are from the DOJ, so you're asking them to go against their own people.
They're not going to do it.
It just doesn't happen. We just
no.
Don't
That's
have
the
a
reason
record
as we represent pro-life pregnancy centers around the country, we've been very resistant and very reluctant to participate with the FBI because the trust level, frankly, is zero. So when it's zero, your trust. Why would you do it?
All right, welcome back to Sekulow. Before we get to your calls, too, just an update, too. There's an update in President Trump's case, a substantive update in the case on just where the trial is. So we know that the trial date has been set for August 14th. Now, that comes with an asterisk. That means actually 9 days before the first Republican debate in Milwaukee on August 23rd.
Which you may not go to.
Now, it's an asterisk because the pretrial motions are also set to be due by July 24th. Depending on what's in those motions, that August 14th date could be
there's going to be a motion for a clear statement of facts. So motion is going to be made. There's going to be a motion to dismiss.
Yeah.
There'll be a whole series of motions on some irregularities. On the other hand, the August 14th date, when I initially thought they were talking about August 14th, 2024. It's 2023. That would be the speedy trial date.
Yeah.
Now, there's this strategy, I'm not saying to do it, which is to tell the Department of Justice, okay, let's go.
These are all typical.
And I'm not sure the Justice Department is ready, but it does not sound like the president has a legal team that's fully in place yet.
These are preliminary dates.
Yes.
None of this is set in stone. What the judge here is doing is, so if President Trump does elect a speedy trial, that will also depend on what kind of motions are filed. I was going to ask you, because could there be, in this stage of the trial, the substantive motions on should a former president even be subject to this? Like the constitutional questions that could arise to the Supreme Court. Is that later on?
Well, the Supreme Court aspect of it would be, because these were acts, they're going to say the obstruction took place after he was president, but the files themselves were files when he was president. Yeah. So there's a whole host of questions.
They were being moved while he was.
What you have to have, though, is a comprehensive, look how we did it. We had a comprehensive legal team. We had our team. We had Jane and Marty Raskin. I mean, really well-known, well-respected criminal defense lawyers. The White House counsel's office was involved. We had unbelievable depth on our team. I mean, so you had a multitude of voices going in on all of this. That does not seem to be the strategy that they're doing right now. Again, we're not doing it, so I can't tell, but that's what it seems like. All right, let's go back to the phone.
Yeah, Kristen in Maryland on line 3. Hey, Kristen.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I wanted to, I'm wondering, because this is something that a lot of people don't know about, what's taking place with Biden, the corruptness, et cetera. And my question is, if he's compromised in any way, what does that mean for the vice president?
Well, here's the only way you find out, okay? Let's be realistic. You cannot indict a sitting president. So even if these allegations about charisma and money going to the Biden family and went to the president, you can't indict him for that while he's president. So what happens is you could do an impeachment. He's not going to be convicted. He may be impeached, but at the trial, he's not going to be convicted. There's no allegations made really as to the vice president on any of this. And the only way she can be removed from office also, she could, if there was criminality, which no one has alleged, it's impeachment. It's the political process. So that's not there. Now, they have so lowered the bar to impeachment that nothing's off the table at this point. But I don't think that's healthy for a constitutional republic, quite honestly. That's my view of it. Matt is calling from Ohio. Hi, Matt.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
You guys appreciate what you guys are doing.
Thanks.
with the complete imbalance of power,
Yep.
and without rehashing everything you guys have been discussing for the last 2 weeks, obviously with Biden and with President Trump, how do we keep our country legally? How do we keep our country from becoming World War II Germany, where they're using our DOJ as a political weapon?
Well, they have weaponized the Department of Justice, not just the IRS, and not just the Department of Justice, the IRS. The IRS was being weaponized back in 2010. Well, how do we handle it? We went to federal court, got a restraining order basically against the Internal Revenue Service, had them pay damages, had them change all their policies, but there's still bad actors there, even within the IRS. The story that Jordan ran yesterday, that Jordan and Will talked about on air, was significant. It was significant because an IRS agent using false pretenses went into an individual's home and threaten that individual and her lawyer. And you shouldn't be able to get away with that, so you file a civil rights action against the IRS and that agent. And when you file that, by the way, and I think we should do this anyways, we should do a Freedom of Information Act request on that case regardless and find out who authorized this. Why in the world did this agent think they had this authority, and what has been done to the agent? So, Matt, what you have to do is hold the individuals responsible for these actions accountable. That is the key, and that requires us staying in the fight and not giving up. Look, we're pointing out the facts of what's going on here, but do not lose hope. We live in the greatest country in the world with the greatest liberty and freedom in the world, and we just got to defend it. That's what's really at stake here.
Ken in Michigan on line 5. Hey, Ken.
Hi. Hello, and thank you for taking my call. And thank you for all the work you do defending the Constitution and Bill of Rights.
Thanks, Ken.
My question has to do with the 14th Amendment. If we have equal protection under the law, why is it we can't maybe take some of these cases and bring them out to the courts as a test or a challenge? If you can get a ruling like you get with Hunter Biden and then a ruling like you got with Trump's CFO, that seems to me like
well, you can. Let me tell you what you can do. I'm sure the lawyers are going to do this. I mean, there's with the issues called selective prosecution. Now the difference in the Biden case and in the Weisselberg case was Weisselberg was in the state court system. But I mean, you're talking about minor infractions, and ends up in Rikers Island. And now you got the not paying $1.5 million worth of taxes on $1.5 million worth of unreported income, and the fine for that. I mean, this is what you have to. The fine for that is 2 misdemeanors, which is like a traffic ticket. I mean, that's the absurd nature of this. And I think, the lawyers have to bring those kind of motions. Now, for us there's not much we can do on that front other than point out the obvious. And the obvious here is that this is absurd. And it is absurd.
Yeah.
So whenever we say elections have consequences, this election's had real consequence. Now I want to focus in on the legal matter again. So I really believe this, folks. Then this is where the president needs to get his legal team in order, former president. They're about to have an avalanche. This is an avalanche. It's an indictment out of New York, manageable. An indictment out of the Department of Justice on the obstruction, more problematic just because of the nature of the proceeding. But get good lawyers in there, and I think winnable case, but get to work. Georgia you're talking 4 weeks from now? They think the Georgia indictment's going to be out. And then in between that, there may be indictments coming out of January 6th. Because that's a separate grand jury investigating that. So we are looking like Venezuela. Our political opponents go to jail, but if you're the president's son, Joe Biden's son, you get 2 misdemeanors, a slap on the wrist, and a diversion on a felony gun count. And of course the Department of Justice is saying we're not going to comment about it. And this was a U.S. attorney that was appointed by President Trump. But who knows I don't know what the pressures were or were not. I just know this. Alan Weisselberg spent months in a real bad prison for taking a free company car and tuition for his grandkids, which I don't know how that wasn't legal, but I don't know the individual facts of that because there's tax provisions of the Internal Revenue Code that allow that. But nevertheless, that's the 2-tiered system of justice. But you better be prepared to fight back, and fight back in a big way, because if you don't fight back in a big way, you know what ends up happening? Let me be clear. It doesn't end well. You've got to be prepared. This is battle by combat, is what Rudy Giuliani famously said. Combat not meaning physical violence. It's the clash of the titans in the courtroom. That's what happens. It's not what happens on the streets. It's not what happens in civil rights protests or civil disobedience or First Amendment protests. It's what the clash in the courtroom. Jack Smith is very good at indicting. He's not very good at convicting. I don't want this to be the exception to that rule.